Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. On January 15th, 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 took off from LaGuardia Airport in New York City, bound for Charlotte, North Carolina. But just 94 seconds after takeoff, the plane struck a flock of geese. Both engines failed, and the airplane had not quite reached 3,000 feet of altitude. So we're talking about full engine failure at 3,000 feet with this airplane hauling 155 people, 150 passengers and 5 crew, and it's flying over one of the most densely populated cities in the world. And Captain Chesley Sullenberger, better known as Captain Sully, he only had a few seconds to decide what to do. So the bird strike happens, and he starts talking to his co-pilot, and he decides, should we turn back to LaGuardia? Should we try to make it to Teterboro Airport over in New Jersey? Or is there no time to do that? Because basically this airplane has become a glider. There's no thrust. There's no lift. And so he decided to do something that had never successfully been done before, and that's land a commercial jet on the Hudson River. And just over 4 minutes after the bird strike and total engine failure, Captain Sully successfully landed Flight 1549 on the Hudson River. All 155 people on board survived, and it's now known as the Miracle on the Hudson. Now listen, as private school leaders, we don't have to land jets on frozen rivers that are almost frozen in the dead of winter. But when we lead, we do have some moments that are high pressure, high stress, high stakes, and it feels like there's very little margin for error. And so what I want to do on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast is talk about 4 leadership lessons from Captain Sully and the Miracle on the Hudson. So just before we jump into that, I just wanted to let you know that I have a coaching spot that opened up yesterday. And if you're listening to this in real time, it's early January. And, usually when we wrap up a year and the calendar turns over to January 1st, we are thinking back on the year that has just concluded and thinking and looking ahead with optimism to the year that is about to begin. But I think I'm talking to somebody who, when you look back on the year, that there's room for improvement. There's a struggle that you want to overcome. There's a goal that you want to reach. You want to get out of survival mode. You want to figure out how you can spend more time out and about in the school and get into teachers' classrooms and to spend more time with students. That you want the second half of this school year to be better than the first half. Well, I've helped dozens of clients get what they want in one-on-one coaching, and I would love to work with you. And so I do have one spot that just opened up yesterday. All you have to do is email me at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com and just say, tell me more. And what we'll do is we'll hop on a 20-minute free Zoom call where you can just tell me a little about you, a little about your school, what's your biggest goal, what's your biggest struggle, and then we just can go from there. And you can decide if it's a good fit for you to work with me. You listen to the podcast, you know how I teach, you know how I operate, and I would love to be able to help you and work with you one-on-one. So again, if you want to see testimonials from about 24 clients, you can go to theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching, or just email me at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com and say, tell me more. And then I want to give you a free resource. This one's called The 6 Things That Every Private School Teacher Wants from Their Leader. And this guide is a 6-page PDF that will be a real game changer for you. And I guarantee that if you do these 6 things, the teachers at your school will be happy to follow you. So you can get this by going to theprivateschoolleader.com/guide. It's free. The 6 Things That Every Private School Teacher Wants from Their Leader. Again, just go to theprivateschoolleader.com/guide. Okay, so I told you that we're going to talk about 4 leadership lessons from Captain Sully and the Miracle on the Hudson. And so let's just dive right in. Leadership lesson number 1 is make deposits every day. So after this happened, obviously Captain Sully was hailed as a hero, rightly so, and he was on talk shows and did interviews. And one quote that stands out to me from this incident is that Captain Sully said, quote, "For 35 years, I made regular deposits in the Bank of Education, Training, and Experience. On January 15th, 2009, the balance was sufficient so that I could make a sudden and very large withdrawal," end quote. And of course, that answer was in response to the question, well, how did you do it? You know, how did you manage to do this almost seemingly impossible task? And he said for 35 years he had been making deposits, education, training, experience, and that if he ever had to make a sudden and large withdrawal, the balance would be sufficient to cover it. And it was. You know, Captain Sully, he didn't all of a sudden become a great leader or a great pilot on that day at 2,900 feet. He became a great pilot over the course of 3.5 decades. And I want to take this leadership lesson number 1, make deposits every day, and I want to apply it to you as a private school leader in 2 ways. One is deposits in you growing in your education and experience. And then application number 2 is you making deposits in the emotional bank accounts of your teachers and staff. So he said that he had been making deposits in the Bank of Education, Experience, and Training for 35 years. So Captain Sully, on the day of that flight, he had 19,663 flight hours in his career, and he had over 4,700 hours in that airplane, the Airbus 320. Now, his flight hours, I did a little math, he spent almost 2.5 years in the air on all different kinds of aircraft before that day. All of those little deposits added up so that at some point, if there needed to be a big withdrawal, there'd be a sufficient balance to cover that withdrawal. And, you know, he studied, I'm sure he did flight simulators, I'm sure he read the manuals, and he practiced for emergencies he hoped would never happen. We do that at our schools. And he took flying very, very seriously when no one was watching, and he improved his skill and experience. And as private school leaders, I think it's extremely important for us to do the same. And here's the problem, is that most of us feel like we don't have time to grow as leaders. Well, I want to commend you, because the fact that you're listening to this podcast means that you are making the time to grow as a leader. And I always encourage you to multitask, whether you're driving to school or working out or taking the dog for a walk or doing errands or chores around the house, that you can, you know, pop in your earbuds and you can listen to the podcast once a week. And that can help you grow, but only if you apply the things that you learn here, of course. But what does it look like to make deposits in those, in that bank account of experience, so that if in the future you have some big thing that happens, some unexpected sudden withdrawal that needs to be made from your bank of education and experience and skill as a private school leader, how are you going to keep building that so that you have enough to cover that? Well, I think that it's important to go back to what I said before, that he didn't all of a sudden become a good pilot in that moment when the bird strike happened. And so this is the long game over a long period of time when things are calm. Right? When are things ever calm at your school? But listening to the podcast, reading, if you already listen to a podcast, perhaps audiobooks, leadership books, there's a page on my website, theprivateschoolleader.com/top10, and I've listed what I think are the top 10 leadership books. Maybe that's a place to start, is that you get one of those on an audiobook and listen to a chapter a couple times a week. Just the mindset shift of growing, practicing difficult conversations before you need them, thinking through different scenarios. What would I do if, instead of just kind of winging it in the moment, making sure that your policies are clear. Again, it's not something that we can predict. He could have never predicted what was going to happen that day, even with all of his experience. But the concept is, little by little, for you to improve in the area of school leadership so that you will be ready for whatever comes. And then the second application is for you making deposits in the emotional bank accounts of your teachers and staff. And I've talked about this before on the podcast. I have an episode that I'll link in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 168. But you're making deposits. And how do you make deposits in emotional bank accounts? Well, Sully, his crew trusted him, and it wasn't because of his title as the pilot. It was because of who he was before the crisis. I think that his co-pilot, it might have been the first flight with him, but the crew had worked with him before. And so your teachers, when it comes to making deposits in their emotional bank accounts, treat them like people first and as employees second. Listen and show empathy. Support your teachers in public and address issues in private. Keep your promises. The bar is pretty low in America for leadership in, you name it, in whether it's in politics or in churches or in business, in the corporate world, whatever. The bar is pretty low for high integrity, ethical leaders. And so if you are an ethical leader with integrity and you try to treat people with empathy and compassion, you are going to make deposits in their emotional bank accounts. And then once you've made enough deposits, the check is going to clear when you have to have a hard conversation with that person, whether it's talking to them about something that they're not doing, like giving them some honest but difficult feedback, or maybe you make an unpopular decision and you announce it at the middle school teachers meeting. Those are withdrawals. But we can't maintain a great relationship with our staff if we're not building trust. We have to make those deposits because it's just a matter of time until you have to make a withdrawal. Many times on purpose, sometimes by accident. But what I've found over the years is that if you just day by day make those deposits, then things go a lot better when you have to make the withdrawal. So we're applying this leadership lesson number 1, make deposits every day. We're applying it in 2 ways. One is deposits for your experience in education and training and skill as a leader. And then the other is making deposits in the emotional bank accounts of your teachers and staff. And that brings us to leadership lesson number 2. And that is calm is contagious. Calm is contagious. And, Captain Sully has said repeatedly that what made the difference that day in January of 2009 was not just his skill, but it was that he and his crew remained calm under that incredibly stressful situation. And I've heard the cockpit voice recordings. They're not very long to listen to. The whole flight only lasted a little over 4 minutes. But you hear him very clear communication, very steady tone. There's no panic in his voice, just very calm. And so him being calm, obviously it helped him think and figure things out and decide we can do this and we can't do this. But I said the leadership lesson is that calm is contagious. I really believe that also impacted First Officer Skiles, and it impacted his 3 flight attendants. And because he stayed emotionally regulated, they stayed emotionally regulated. Because I think that emotions, think about this for a second, emotions spread faster than logic. True or false? I think it's true that emotion spreads faster than logic. So they pick up, they being your teachers and staff, the students, the families. Our schools are looking to us as leaders to set the tone for the school. And how well you regulate your nervous system, you become the emotional thermostat in your school. I'm going to say that again. I said before that calm is contagious. How well you regulate your nervous system, you are the emotional thermostat in your school. You set the temperature. You don't just, thermometers react to temperature and report the temperature. A thermostat sets the temperature. You set the emotional thermostat in your school, and then people are going to copy you. So if you're anxious and stressed out and have an unpredictable mood, then your teachers are going to be stressed out and anxious, and parents are going to be reactive, and the teachers are going to get defensive, and things are going to be all over the place. But if you stay calm, that allows people to, okay, well, if the leader's calm, then I can be calm. And this is true in a crisis, of course, but this is also true every single day. That the more calm and the more predictable you are, when you earn your Academy Award, because on the inside you're freaking out, but on the outside, I'm not talking about toxic positivity, saying everything's fine as the Titanic slips beneath the surface. That's not what I'm talking about. But optimism, calm, clear communication, just calm is contagious. And so a couple quick examples of how you could do that, like pause before responding. We need to be responding, not reacting. And when we're calmer, we are more likely to pause and respond than we are to have a knee-jerk reaction and react. And so how quickly do you respond to an email that's upsetting? Or how do you react when a teacher gives you feedback, or when there's an unexpected surprise? I hate surprises. I know you probably hate surprises at school for sure, but are we pausing? And then just one more tip, and that is to lower your voice when you're stressed. Because I think that we don't even realize it, and we tend to have maybe our pitch goes up, or our tone changes, or our volume goes up when we're really stressed out. Your team needs to see that you've got this, so that they then can, it's contagious. Calm is contagious. Then they're like, okay, we've got this. And just because you're calm, that doesn't mean you're never going to have a bird strike kind of day at your school. But what it does mean is if you're a calm leader, that on that bird strike kind of day, that you're much more likely to have teachers and staff around you that are also going to be a little calmer as they navigate the situation or the crisis. And that brings us to leadership lesson number 3, which is think and prepare when you are smart. Think and prepare when you are smart. So Sully didn't just come up with a plan for what do you do when there's a bird strike. He didn't just like invent a plan in the first 5 seconds after the bird strike. He knew, and First Officer Skiles, they both knew what they were supposed to do when there's a bird strike. And First Officer Skiles, he pulls out the binder and the checklist and starts going through it. But they had to both rely on their training and the checklists and the simulators that they had done and clear protocols as to who's in charge and the communication with the tower and communicating with the flight attendants so that they knew what to tell the passengers when they were going to ditch in the river, and all these things. That didn't all just immediately somehow magically appear in their brains. We have to prepare for stressful situations when we're smart, because cortisol and adrenaline make us dumber. And that's supported by research. That from an impairment standpoint, it's on the same level as alcohol impairment or sleep deprivation impairment is when you're super stressed and your brain is full of cortisol and adrenaline. There's a reason that they say, we talk about fight or flight. We talk about tunnel vision. That's because when you're in fight or flight, your peripheral vision kind of disappears. And that's so that you can focus more clearly on the threat that is in front of you, or at least running away and seeing the terrain in front of you. And so we don't want to have to do a lot of thinking while we're in that stressful situation. Of course, you have to do some thinking, and of course, you have to make some decisions. But if we have clear policies that we write and review in a calm season, like the summertime, if we have crisis communication plans, if we have a clear student discipline framework, let me just take a sidebar on that one. Let me give you an example. If your school has a clear discipline framework, then when a situation happens, a discipline situation with, let's say, a 8th grade student, of course it's stressful because of what they just did. The only thing that makes it more stressful is when you don't have a clear discipline framework that when this happens, then this is the consequence. And then you've got upset teachers, you've got upset parents, and everyone is given their opinion on how this should go down as far as like should this child be suspended or expelled or get a detention or just whatever it is. So whether this is a staff or a faculty member, a teacher, and it's a personal professional improvement plan, or if it's a termination, separation of employment, if it's fill in the blank with what the stressful things that happen every day at our schools. If we have, I'm not saying that this is going to be perfect. I'm not saying that this is going to eliminate all of your problems, but I am saying that the more thinking and planning and policy writing and rehearsing and having fire drills and having lockdown drills and following the discipline framework, following the faculty handbook, following the student handbook, clearly communicating those policies, and even sometimes practicing scenarios, maybe with your leadership team at a leadership meeting. When we are proactively planning when things are calm, when we're thinking and preparing when we're smart, then when our brains are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, we can follow procedures instead of trying to think on our feet. And so leadership lesson number 3 from Captain Sully and the Miracle on the Hudson is to think and prepare when you are smart. And that brings us to our 4th and final leadership lesson, and that is people always come first. People always come first. And so that day, those fleeting seconds between the bird strike and when he ditched on the Hudson River, Captain Sully was focused on a lot of things, but let me tell you what he was not focused on. He was not focused on the cost of the plane and, oh no, I'm going to damage this plane. He was not focused on, oh no, the airline, the liability. There's probably going to be a lawsuit. He wasn't focused on his career or his reputation. He wasn't focused on even specifically all the steps in the manual, because he turned on a thing called the APU, and the NTSB in the investigation, they said that was one of the things, him immediately turning on the APU, that helped give them a little bit more lift, a little bit more time. But you know what? Turning on the APU was number 25 on the checklist. So I'm saying he didn't follow every single step in order in the manual. He wasn't thinking about, oh no, I better follow this 1, 2, 3 steps. So he isn't thinking about the cost of the damage to the plane. He isn't thinking about liability. He isn't thinking about his reputation. He isn't thinking about going in order in the checklist. You know what he was thinking about? He was thinking about one thing. I need to save 155 lives right now. And every decision that he made was about survival, period. What is survivable? Well, running out of lift on his way to Teterboro Airport in New Jersey and crashing into a housing development, that's not saving lives. It's killing more people on the ground. And so how do we apply this to school leadership? Well, in high-stress moments, sometimes, I'm not going to say you, I'll just say me, sometimes in high-stress moments I would think, okay, well, what can we do here that we won't get sued? What will people think of this decision? How do I protect the reputation of the school? How do I protect my reputation? Oh, man, this parent, they're a donor, and I know their kid did this, but ... All of those have been true about me in high-stress moments. But a better question to ask is, what's best for the kids? What's best for the kids? Just like Captain Sully, he had one focus that was from his core value of being a pilot, was to get people safely to their destination. This is something that was a big game changer in my career, was when we'd be in the middle of a discussion in a middle school teachers meeting or a lower school teachers meeting or maybe a leadership team meeting or a board meeting. And sometimes when we were going back and forth or going in circles, you've been there, right? I would just pause and I would say, well, what's best for the kids? What's best for the kids? And we can also throw in there what's best for the teachers and the staff. But I think it's, number one, what's best for the kids. Number two, what's best for the teachers and staff. Remember, I said leadership lesson number 4 is people always come first. That was true for Captain Sully. It has to be true for us as leaders, because when we say and ask the question, what's best for kids? What's best for our kids, these kids in this school, the ones we've been entrusted with? It sometimes clarifies decisions. Sometimes it takes personalities out of it. For me, it certainly reduced regret when I would answer the question, what's best for kids, and make a decision accordingly. It kind of ties us to our core values and our mission statement as a school, which is another, just a quick sidebar here. Sometimes when you're stuck in those meetings that are going back and forth and round, sometimes it helps to pull out the mission statement and read it and say, what is the decision that most aligns with our mission statement? But I feel confident bringing that up because our mission statements better be all about what's best for kids, or we need a new mission statement. So when I say what's best for kids, I don't mean ignoring policies. I don't mean, focusing too much on optics and not on what our policies say. But I want you to think about this as a decision filter. Every decision that Captain Sully made that day was through the filter of, How can I save the lives of all 155 people on board this plane? And when we make a decision, we have to make it through that decision filter of what's best for kids, what's best for the kids at our school. So what are the big takeaways from today's episode? Well, we're doing 4 leadership lessons from Captain Sully and the Miracle on the Hudson. Leadership lesson number 1, make deposits every day. He made deposits in his bank of experience, education, and skill for 35 years so that he could make a sudden and significant withdrawal, and the balance would be high enough to support that withdrawal, and it was. And so for us, we need to grow as leaders, and we need to pour into our people and make deposits in their emotional bank accounts. Leadership lesson number 2 is calm is contagious. And so remember, if we can stay calm, even if we have to earn our Academy Award, everyone else is going to be more calm because they're looking to us. And if we're all stressed out, they're going to be stressed out. You as the school leader are the thermostat, the emotional thermostat for your school or for your division. Leadership lesson number 3, think and prepare when you are smart. Because when cortisol and adrenaline floods your brain, we all get dumber. And so we want to lean in on those policies and procedures and drills and things that we thought about and prepared when we were smart. And then leadership lesson number 4 is that people always come first. Sully was trying to make sure that all 155 people survived and he was successful. We need to make sure we're using the decision filter of what's best for the kids. So I like to end every episode with a call to action, and I'd like for you to ask yourself, which leadership lesson do I need to apply the most? So pick one out of the 4, and then take one action in the next week to implement that leadership lesson at your school. And then just another quick reminder, I told you that yesterday I had a coaching spot come open, and I'd like you to have it. I'd like to help you with overcome your biggest struggle, to reach your biggest goal, to get unstuck, however it is that you're stuck, whatever it is that is your biggest challenge right now at school. And so just shoot me an email at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com, mark.o.minkus@gmail.com, and say, tell me more. And then another reminder, a free gift for you, the 6 things that every private school teacher wants from their leader. You can grab that free guide at theprivateschoolleader.com/guide. Show notes are at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 168. And if you get value from this podcast, I would just really appreciate it if you would share the link to the podcast with another school leader that you know or a rising leader at your school. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I want to say I appreciate you so much and all of your hard work that you're doing for those lucky kids and teachers at your school. Thank you for taking some of your precious time to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.